About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor to You, and we're back. We haven't had an A-Level Geography live stream for a few weeks, but here we are, back by special demand for this week. We've got two sessions this week, tonight and Thursday night, and we're going to be looking at hot deserts. I've got to stop myself from saying hot desserts. We're doing hot deserts. We're looking at systems and processes. Just get my titled absolutely correct. Massive welcome to those of you who are joining us live. If you are doing, we're looking forward to seeing your responses to our questions in the chat as we go along. If you're watching this on catch up, hello to you as well. Of course, you can take your time over answering some of the questions. Now, I'm not going to be talking about hot desserts much tonight. Hot deserts. I'm not going to be talking about that much. I'm joined by two very able and capable geography teachers. I've got Catherine in the middle of the screen and Fiona making her debut on the right hand side of the screen. Good evening, both.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Fiona, do you want to give us a quick introduction to tonight's session?
Yes, so as you said, we're looking at systems and the landscapes, so the first half of the specification, and we're really focusing in on the content that was made available by AQA for the advanced information. So it's going to be very specific to what we're going to expect from the exam in May, and it might not be the most widely taught subject at A level compared to coasts, but it is a great subject. So hopefully we've got a good, challenging and interesting session for you.
Wow. Well, it's good to be back, and it sounds like we've got a real fascinating one. So I'm going to hand it straight over to you guys. Let me put the PowerPoint on.
Okay, so I'm starting us off with a little bit of activity to warm up your brain. So, this is a 60-second challenge. There are going to be terms that come up on the screen, and you just need to match them with their definition. Now, what I would love to see is that you are typing into the chat box the numbers and letters matching them up. So, for example, you would have A, and then you're going to look and see which number you think would go with it and put those together, and we can share some ideas via the chat box. So let's give this a go. Should we start the clock? Remember, we're going to think about the letters. We're going to think about which numbers match with them. These key words here are so important, not just in this topic, but also all the topics. Right, we've had just over half the time, so let's see. Oh, thank you very much. Right, okay. We've got Katie, who is popping in an answer there. Right, can anyone else add some of their ideas to the chat box? Oh, that's it. We've got some more coming through now. Lovely to see. Right, okay, so we've had the 60 seconds. So let's see any last answers for the chat box. Okay, so as I was saying, these are really important words because these don't just come up in the hot deserts topic, they come up in physical geography topics across the different subjects. And it's really important you have this deep understanding of the systems approach. If you are interested in how they relate to other topics, we have done tutor to you sessions previously on the carbon cycle and the water cycles where we've looked at the systems approach. The same with ghosts. So if you enjoy this one, have a look at some of the others. So let's see the answers now. Right, okay, so let's see. So yeah, well done, Katie. You popped down about F being 6. That was absolutely correct. And about G being 2. And well done to Alice. Got a C there being 1. So the big thing to really think about here, when we're looking at positive feedback, people might think, yay, this is really good. But actually, positive feedback means that the change is being amplified, a bit like a sort of snowball effect, going further from equilibrium. And that might not be a good thing. Negative feedback, of course, is the opposite. So there has been a change, and what happens next is actually pulling it back to the equilibrium again. And I've been using this word equilibrium here, dynamic equilibrium, you know, the technical way there, talking about the system being balanced with the inputs and the outputs being equal. And that leads us on to the inputs and outputs. So when we're thinking about systems, we've got different types of systems, closed and open systems. And with all of them, we're thinking about matter and we're thinking about energy. So we're thinking about, do we have inputs of matter into the system? Do we have inputs of energy? Do we have outputs of matter, outputs of energy? When we've got the system, it is in different components, and an important component is stores, which is where energy or mass is being stored. It's being kept there. And then we've got the flows or the transfers, where we've got the linkages between those different stores and components. So well done for that. Let's have a little look at the next slide. Now, this is what I was just saying there. So the systems approach goes through all of the different topics, and that first activity is relevant regardless of which of those topics you're looking at. But in deserts, you're going to need to think about how does the systems approach underlie the processes, the landforms, the different issues that are operating in a desert. So the systems approach is absolutely key. Okay, so I think we're moving now over to Fiona.
Hi, yes, I'm going to be talking you through desert landscapes now. Now, this is going to be a little bit of revision, but also some discussion as to what kinds of questions might come up on desert landscapes. So first of all, we have the hamada, and the hamada is recognizable by its bare rocky surface. It's produced by the wind removing fine products of weathering, so the wind process known as deflation, and the finer grained products are taken in suspension while the sand is removed through saltation and surface creep, leaving behind a landscape of gravel, boulders, and bare rock, which we can see in that photo. The second distinctive landscape is the Reg. The Reg, or sometimes known as the desert pavement or gibber, is recognized as a very stony desert. So you can see the difference between those two photos there. There's a lot more stone or rock covering a lot more of the surface in the second photo. And that is very, very closely packed, interlocking, angular or rounded rock fragments of pebble size. This is normally found on top of alluvial fans, and the desert varnish collects on the exposed surface rocks over time. And the third distinctive landscape, which a lot of you will be very familiar with, and is normally the first picture that comes to mind when we're talking about deserts, is the erg. The erg is sometimes called a sand sea, a dune sea, or if it hasn't got any dunes, it's called a sand sheet, which is just a broad, flat area of desert covered with wind-swept sand with little to no vegetation cover. And you can see that in the photo there. And the reason we brought this slide up is because you might get a photo as part of a figure that might ask you to identify and discuss the different types of landscapes, or you might get a 4-mark question asking you to distinguish between the landscapes. Or it might become relevant in your 20 marker to discuss these different distinctive landscapes in either the introduction or the conclusion, just to show you have a real holistic understanding of the landscape that we're talking about here. I think we're going on to the picture grid now. So the way this works is you're going to see 6 questions, and the answer to each question reveals part of a photo or of an image. And we're going to see if we can work out what the image is. So after each question, I'm going to pause for a little while to see if you can answer the question in the chat. And then we will discuss the answer before moving on to the next one. And bit by bit, the picture will be revealed. Okay, so our first question is, what is the name of soils that form in arid and semi-arid environments? So I'll just give you a brief moment there to answer in the chat, see if anyone can get this. Okay, that's some good attempts. Could we reveal the answer, please? So the answer is arid soils. So arid meaning dry, soils meaning soils. And these are characterized by being dry most of the year, and they have limited leaching. Due to limited moisture and accumulated salts, these soils are not very fertile at all, which is why we don't find very much vegetation in the desert. Let's have a look at the image that it reveals. There we go. Maybe it's starting to help you identify where we are. So our second question is, how little precipitation do deserts generally receive? Let's see if we can get this in the chat. Okay, let's reveal the answer. So we have less than 25 centimeters a year, or 250 millimeters. So that is what defines our desert. Now, this can be looked at as semi-arid regions, and they get between 250 and 500 milliliters a year. So make sure you understand what makes an area arid and what makes an area semi-arid. Let's see the picture that it reveals. So the next question we have is, what do you call plants that are adapted to dry climates? Let's see if there's anyone in the chat that can give us the answer to this one. Okay, let's reveal the answer to this one. Yes, we have Zyrophytes. So these have mechanisms to prevent water loss or to store available water. Succulents such as cacti are examples of these, and you might have these around your house. Have a look to see how you might think that it's adapted to its environment. Okay, let's reveal the image and the next question. So what is the general daytime temperature of hot deserts? Let's see if we can get the right answer in the chat. Well done to those of you that have taken part already. And as Alice has just pointed out, she can see the cacti in the image being revealed. Okay, let's reveal the answer to that one. Usually we have a 20 to 40 degrees Celsius during the daytime. The highest ever temperature recorded in the desert was 56.7 degrees, and that was recorded in Death Valley in the United States back in 1913. And what's important to understand is that there is a very big temperature difference between day and nighttime, because at nighttime, without the clouds, we've got very, very rapid heat escaping without the sun to make it nice and warm. So let's reveal the image behind that and the penultimate question. So a little bit more difficult one here. What causes desert winds to have high velocity? So perhaps if you're at home and you need a little longer to think about this, pause the video where it is and you can have a think about this one. Give it a little bit longer on this one. Okay, let's discuss the answer. So the velocity of the wind in the desert is a result of the air pressure differences due to heating and cooling and the lack of interrupting or diverting structures. So nothing's getting away and these wind speeds are quite high velocity. And then the last question, please. So nice, easy one to finish with. True or false? Deserts can experience dry thunderstorms. Let's see if we can get the answer in the chat. See what the general consensus is from the chat, whether it's true or false. Yes, well done. Let's reveal the answer then and give this a go. Now, this could be a trick question. It can experience dry thunderstorms. So lightning and thunderstorms do happen in the desert. The precipitation evaporates before reaching the surface due to the extreme temperatures. So that might have tripped you up a little bit, but hopefully not too much. And the explanation there helps you out if it has. Okay, let's move on to our next activity. Oh, we must reveal the image. So if anyone can guess where this place is, perhaps some of you have studied it as part of your case study. So let's reveal this place, please. So this is the Sonoran Desert in the USA or Mexico. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. Catherine's going to take over now.
Thank you very much, Fiona.
Question, Alice.
Thank you. Alice has just put in the questions there, has Catherine been on holiday there? I've been to Arizona, but I haven't been to the desert in Mexico, so I have to go on my to-do list there. So absolutely lovely photos. So photos really important, obviously, in geography, a really important skill that students will use at GCSE, and you might need to use them in your A-level exams as well. We get in the exam papers, we get 6-mark questions where you are given a figure to look at, and it can be all sorts of things. It could be a map, it could be sometimes, quite complex diagrams, but sometimes it can be a picture. Sometimes you are looking at a photograph, and do you know what? That can actually throw people because they look at it and they're thinking, well, this is a bit simple. But what you're looking at when we're looking at 6-mark questions, you have to think, which question is it you're doing? Because, of course, there's the one that is just marked for the analysed bits. But if we're looking at something where we're having your own knowledge as well, the question that's marked for AO1 and AO2, then you are going to need to be looking at that picture, saying what you can see, and then adding in your own knowledge. You could, for AO1, you could be thinking about understanding of the places that you've studied and environments, thinking about relevant concepts and processes. How are interactions being demonstrated in the picture? What is change going to be doing? And thinking about different scales. And we're going to come on to that in a moment. And then there's the application. We need to be able to, in geography, apply our knowledge and understanding in different contexts. And when we're looking at a photograph, we could be using our knowledge and understanding to apply it to the unfamiliar context that we're seeing in that photograph. There may be a title on the photograph which is going to give us information. Always worth reading that really carefully and looking at the picture, look at the foreground, look at the background, and really think what is going on in that picture. And we mentioned thinking about a variety of scales. Scale, of course, could be temporal scale. What is going to happen over time? What might have happened in the past? What is likely to happen in the future? Because deserts are dynamic and we see that change. So you might be able to comment on temporal change. And also think spatially, think about the scale we're looking at and think about whether what you're looking at is something which is going to be replicated over a large area or if it's something that's going to be happening in a very local context. So let's have a look at a couple of pictures to apply this learning. Okay, so first of all, we've got a good old rock pedestal there. So looking in that picture, we can see that we've got the rock pedestal and we can have a little think about the concepts that are related there. We can think about the erosion processes that are going to be affecting the lower part of the pedestal. We can think about why we've got that narrowing of the bottom of the rock pedestal and why we've got that larger piece on top. You know, sometimes they're known as mushroom rocks. And so think about the idea of the sand only lifting to a certain height and affecting a certain part of that structure. Maybe that rock that is lying by the rock pedestal is something that we need to be thinking about. Maybe that is showing us some temporal variation. Maybe that was once part of this structure. And then the dynamic nature of the structure means that that broke off. And of course, eventually, we're going to see the narrowing of that rock pedestal to such an extent that we're going to see the collapse of the rock pedestal. So just looking at that picture, just looking at that image, we can think about what we can see in the image, and then we can apply our knowledge and understanding, bringing in the concepts, bringing in the processes to really analyze and think about what's going on there. Now, the second picture is not such an immediately obvious landform as a good old traditional rock pedestal. We're looking at a Ventefact there. And again, you would be using this image and you would be thinking about what it tells us about this landform in this landscape. So now I'm going to hand back over to Fiona, and she is going to develop this idea of thinking about Ventefacts further.
Yeah, I'm just going to answer Harold's question there, who's just asked if that's pumice on the previous slide. So those small holes in the rock on the right there have been made by wind-blown sediment. Okay, and we're going to explore just how that process evolves over the 4 stages in our stepping stones activity. So what we're going to do is we're going to complete a chain to illustrate the cause and effect to explain Ventefacts. Now, the reason we've chosen Ventefacts is because that is the only landform that's been included on your advanced information. So we're pretty certain that we need to know in depth how this forms. So if we go on to the first slide of the Pebble Stones activity. So here we have the start and the end of the example explanation of how Ventefacts are formed. So the first statement being Ventefacts are individual rocks and stones that are regularly the focus of wind erosion. Ventefacts are rocks that have been sculpted by wind-borne particles. So we need to think about what is the next step? What would be the next logical thing to talk about? So we've mentioned wind erosion. Perhaps someone could suggest in the chat what type of wind erosion we might be talking about next. Okay, so if I give you a couple of minutes to think about that, I'll read through the last statement as well, if that helps maybe fill in some of the gaps for you. So Ventefacts are typically found in arid environments where there is little vegetation to interfere with aeolian particle transport, where there are frequently strong winds, and where there is a steady but not overwhelming supply of sand. So if we just give this 30 seconds to see if we can think of the second step, and then once we've got the answer to the second step, we can talk about what the third step might be. Oh, yes, Harold's got it already. So Harold, have a think about how you might develop that into a sentence to explain the formation of Ventefacts. Of course, if you are watching later, you can always pause this and have a go at writing a complete answer yourself before we reveal the second and third steps. Does it give yourself a little bit more of a challenge? Or if you need a little bit more support, give yourself a bit more time to think about the second and third steps. So let's have a go at revealing the second step then before we talk about the third. So the second step would be abrasion causes worn, faceted, cut, or polishing with wind-blown sand. So what would be happening next after this? So let's give you another 20, 30 seconds to think about the third step. So what's missing between the process that we've just spoken about? So we've described what it is. Then we've talked about the process that is causing it, and we've gone into depth with this. What is missing between that and the last sentence here? Okay, let's have a reveal of that answer. So the upper part of the rock is abraded, while its lower part that is below the ground or out of the main concentration of abrasion remains angular or subangular. Okay, so this can be mostly focused on the level that the wind-blown sediment is being fired at the rock. Okay, because obviously with wind-blown sediment, it doesn't get carried too high, it doesn't get carried too low. So we're sort of looking at the middle to top section of the Ventefacts where this abrasion is mostly focused. Okay, and then we're looking at also some of the pop marks that I looked at, that I spoke about in the previous photo, that can be evidence of the wind-blown sediment abrading the rock. So here is an example of a step-by-step example answer to Ventefact formation. And perhaps if you are watching later at home, or if you're recapping and we've already watched it live, you can pause this here and maybe draw this out as a storyboard or a diagram to help with your revision for the exam. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to a bubble quiz with Catherine.
Thank you, Fiona. I think that stepping stones approach is just so useful. Thank you for going through that. I think people are going to be sat in the exam and there'll be a question will come up about Ventefacts and they'll be really, really grateful that you went through that with them. So that's brilliant. So we're going to do a bubble quiz now. It's going to be slightly different if you're used to doing tutor to you videos, slightly different from some of the other bubble quizzes. Sorry, I'm mumbling them, bubble quizzes. So what we've got here is we're going to have a question and answers pop up. And each time, there is this time only going to be one answer. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to pop into the chat box which one you think is the correct answer. So let's have the first one. There they go. There are the bubbles. So we've got there, thermal fracture is a type of. So let's have a little think. Is it mechanical weathering, erosion, chemical weathering, or biological weathering? So could you pop in the chat box A, B, C, or D to let me know which one you think thermal fracture is? So just one answer here. Let's have a little think. Is it A, B, C, or D? Right. Oh, Harold, you are fantastic. Well done. Let's have the reveal and confirm that Harold is right. Mechanical weathering. A. So thermal fracture is a type of mechanical weathering. On to our next one. Right, so this time we're looking at hydrolysis. So we've got the same sort of options coming up here. So we've got biological weathering, mechanical weathering, chemical weathering, or erosion. So which letter are you going to go for this time? Which one would hydrolysis be a type of? So pop those letters into the chat box would be fantastic. Right. Okay. So has Harold done it again? Let's see the answer. Yes, he has. Fantastic. So hydrolysis is a type of chemical weathering. Okay. On to the next one. Right. Okay. So we've got abrasion is a type of. So is it A, chemical weathering, B, biological weathering, C, erosion, or D, mechanical weathering? So which one is abrasion going to be? Let's see those answers. So which letter do we think is the one for abrasion? Right, okay, so this was a bit of a sneaky easy one. So let's see the answer. Yeah, so it was the erosion one. All the others were types of weathering, and the odd one out there is erosion. So abrasion there is involving the wearing away and transportation away. So we've got erosion rather than the weathering processes which happen in situ. Okay, next one. Exfoliation. Exfoliation is a type of. So is this A, erosion, B, mechanical weathering, C, chemical weathering, or D, biological weathering? So have a little think which one of these would be exfoliation and pop the letter into the box. Right, let's reveal the answer for this tricky one. Right, so it's a bit more tricky, isn't it? We don't hear about exfoliation so much, but that is a type of mechanical weathering. Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at the next one. Oxidation. So oxidation is a type of, is it A, chemical weathering, B, biological weathering, C, erosion, or D, mechanical weathering? Can you let me know which letter you think it is by popping it into that chat box? You're doing really well. We've had some great answers so far. Right. Okay. So let's see now. Let's see which one it is. Okay. So oxidation, chemical weathering going on there. So we've got a chemical process that's happening. And like I said before, erosion, that's involving the wearing away and transporting away. Weathering is happening in situ, it's happening in the place. Okay. So I can't remember if we got any more. No. So we're moving on there to look at some specification terminology. And so what we've got here is an example. So if you've got a question asking you to outline the process of mechanical weathering in hot deserts, or you might have a question asking you to explain the factors leading to mechanical weathering in hot deserts, that question might look like it's quite simple, but they might be expecting you to describe thermal fracture, exfoliation, block and granular disintegration, all of those different things come under that question. So you need to make sure before you get into that exam hall that you are confident on these and that you are able to use them in your answers. Alternatively, the question could be asking about chemical weathering. And again, it may look very simple, but you might need to write about crystal growth, hydration, hydrolysis, oxidation. And again, you need to make sure you are really confident when you're walking into the room to be able to use those different terms and understand their meanings. So I think I'm passing over now to Fiona again for a chili quiz.
Yes, so in this chili quiz, you're going to have 60 seconds to answer 3 questions. Each question has a different level of difficulty as rated by the chili rankings below. Award yourself points based on the ranking. Now, if you're going to find it too difficult to answer all 3 questions in 60 seconds, if you're with us live, perhaps you could focus in on one of them. However, if you are watching back to look at this video after it's gone live, perhaps you could pause it and make sure you give yourself enough time to answer all three if you're less confident about doing it in 60 seconds. So let's give this a go. So we've got the question one for mild. We've got exogenous and endorheic are two sources of water in the desert. What is the name of the third? For two, we've got where do exogenous rivers originate from, and three, we've got sheet flooding and channel flash flooding can be linked to one of the three sources of water. Which one and why? So let's start the clock on 60 seconds and see if we can answer all three. So if you're joining us live, please put your answers in the chat. Okay, so just last couple of seconds and we're going to go through at the answer to the first question now. So could you please reveal the answer? Okay, so we've got ephemeral for the first answer. That is the third source of water in the desert. The answer for two is rivers originating from outside the desert, from highlands and more humid environments. And then the answer to question three is ephemeral due to large amounts of overland flow causing intermittent rivers to flow on the baked surface because the surface is impermeable once it's been baked by the sun and the hot temperatures. So well done everybody that joined in with that for live. Well done, lots of good answers there. Some more detailed, putting in a couple of longer sentences. So well done for that. Let's move on to some exam practice. I'm going to talk through a example 4 marker now. So one of the example 4 markers that you could get would be outline the role of hot deserts, water in hot deserts. So we're going to have a look at how to break down this question and then look at some indicative content that we could be writing. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So when we use the command word outline, what do we want from an outline? Can anyone put that in the chat? What does outline mean? What does the exam want you to do? Okay, let's have a discussion of that. So outline means to create a brief summary or a brief account of the topic. Okay, now let's look at the next word in this that we need to discuss. So the next key word in this is role. Now another word for role could be what job does it have? What character does it have? What is the scale or the impact? Okay, so we're looking at the role, and then if we look at the next word that we need to highlight, that is water. So the role of water. So what job does the water have in the hot desert? Let's give a brief summary of it. So let's look at some of the indicative content that we could be talking about in this. Okay, so we've got outlining the role of water in hot deserts. So the water in the hot deserts is episodic in nature. It comes and goes. It is not constant. And it can be very intense. So for example, we have rainfall events that can deliver 2 to 3 times the annual average of water in any 24-hour period. So it's very, very, very intense when the water does arrive. It can also be localized due to intense heating of the desert surface. Localized evaporation, condensation, and thunderstorms all occur. So it's not the whole desert at the same time. It can be a very local event. It can cause flash flooding, sheet flooding, or channel flash flooding, and significant amounts of overland flow as the surface has been baked and is impermeable, as we've spoken about in the previous chilly activity. And significant erosion can take place because of these different types of flooding. So splash erosion, sheet erosion, rill erosion, gully erosion, and bank erosion are all examples of those types of erosion, especially where the gradient of runoff is high. So when you've got perhaps hilly areas, mountainous areas, we've got a very fast overland flow of that water that is falling in the desert. And of course, one role that the water has is that it can create depositional landforms, which I'm not going to dwell on too much at this point, because we know what our landform question is most likely to be when it comes to the exam. But make sure that you are also revising the whole content so that you can provide context to your answers. Okay, that's what to be cautious about with the advanced information. So when we're answering a 4-mark question, what does it want from us? So sometimes we can have the command word define or what is meant by, and this wants you to state the precise meaning of an idea or concept. We've just done outline and summarize, which are very similar. It wants you to provide a brief account of relevant information. And for a 4-marker, there is 1 mark per valid point with an extra mark for the development. So we need to go point development for the 4-mark questions. And the development is further depth and emphasis on what you've just said in your point. So as we've just looked at some examples there. And I think that finishes us for the content today. If you need to go over any of the areas, you can have a look at the resources in the teacher's pack on Tutor2U website, or if you'd like to join us for desertification on Thursday evening, same time, we're going to be going into desertification into a lot of detail, looking at a case study and also a practice 20 marker. So that'll be really useful for you if you'd like to join us then.
Wow, thanks for that. Definitely worth the wait. Like I said, we've not had a Geography A Level session for a few weeks, so it's nice to get back on the track, as it were, and really interesting stuff and fantastic exam skills gold at the end there as well about those command words as well. Really useful stuff. Listen, massive thank you to everybody who's joined us tonight and who's taken part. I've got to make a special mention, I think, to mention to Harold and Katie and Alice, who I think have been consistent with their high quality answers, so massive thank you to you. Thanks also to Fiona and to Catherine for joining us tonight and delivering those activities and those pieces of exam advice brilliantly. As Fiona said, we've got another session on Thursday, so we're going to take the hot desert and we're going to talk about desertification, so we'll go a little bit further and go into a few more exam skills on then. So until Thursday, we'll say goodbye everybody.